I am thrilled to welcome everyone to another incredible session at bigBANG. My name is Tom Kelly, and I lead the engineered materials business here at Celanese Corporation. Community partnerships are at the core of Celanese's 100-year history. From our manufacturing facilities embedded in small rural communities to our business relationships in large metropolitan areas, we know cross-sector partnerships are essential to economic vitality and resiliency. Last year, we deployed several of our most valuable resources, intellectual capital, to support several organizations in South Dallas. Social venture partners delivered content focused on perspective taking, transformational leadership, and societal paradigms. And after 1 week of classroom prep, Celanese employees embedded in local organizations for a 4-week immersive project. I am very proud of the Celanese employees that contributed their energy, enthusiasm, and business acumen to this project and laid the foundation for future programs. That kind of programming makes us better, more knowledgeable citizens of the communities where we live and work. And I'm so excited for you to hear from the phenomenal individuals on this panel and for all of us to learn how we can work together to improve everyday life for people all over the world. And now I'll hand it over to Chantel.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Advancing Economic Equity Through Community Partnerships. We're going to start. In this session, we're going to explore how collaboration can advance equity, especially in the education and workforce spaces in Texas. And we're going to talk about some of the nuts and the bolts of how to get there. We'll start with presentations from each of our panelists, exploring the collaborations that each of them lead. I'd like to introduce you to 3 of our fabulous panelists, Dr. Eric Ban. Dr. Eric Ban is the Managing Director of the Dallas County Promise. The Promise is a transformational effort of school districts, colleges, universities, workforce, and communities to increase college completion aligned to the North Texas workforce. Second, we're going to hear from Bryant Black. Bryant Black joined the Greater Houston Partnership's Upscale Houston initiative as director in July 2017. Since joining Upscale, Bryant's focus has been on engaging employer partners around the way they look at their new and incumbent workforce. And finally, last but not least, we'll hear from Ksenia Benderskaya. Ksenia is a senior advisor in community development at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. She leads the design and implementation of the inaugural round of Advance Together, a Fed-organized accelerator that aims to foster collaboration and leadership for inclusive economic growth. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ban.
Thank you, Chantel. I appreciate it. My name is Eric Ban, Managing Director of the Dallas County Promise at the Commit Partnership here in Dallas. And we'll go to the first slide. And we are just really privileged to kind of be organizing a big coalition of really wonderful partners across K-12, higher ed, workforce, and community. And I think, listening to Dr. Hinojosa here speak about moving the bar on any big issue requires a coalition. And that is what the Commit Partnership does so well, is bringing data to the table, bringing people to the table, really looking at problems and rallying groups and organizations to kind of marshal their resources appropriately to any problem that we as a community can identify. If you go to the next slide, the problem that was identified that came out of a lot of work at the community college in terms of the foundation and leadership was the lack of alignment between the credentials produced and the needs of our workforce. So we are not putting enough students into the higher ed system, and clearly those students are not moving through the higher ed system into employment well. And recently, through the census data, we identified that 1 in 4 adults 25 through 34 earn a living wage in Dallas, and we have some serious equity challenges in Dallas, with our white adults being 3 times more likely to be in that living wage category. So we had some real issues in Dallas, and through the data and the coalition, came around those issues, and through a lot of partnerships, we've implemented what we call the Dallas County Promise. So if you go to the next slide, So the Dallas County Promise, again, came out of a lot of thought leadership from the Community College Foundation, and taking a step back and asking a question about, is there a better way to apply our funding and resources to affect greater change and outcomes in college completion and workforce alignment? So we're kind of based off the Tennessee Promise model, as we took a big team up there and really unpacked what they were doing. We engage our high schools that are over 50% economically disadvantaged, and we bring a free college tuition message to those schools that include the community college, but also a dozen universities, regional universities here. And that messaging and the clarity about it, the promises for all students, is really powerful and impactful. Then students, just because college has an affordable path doesn't mean it's going to work any better. So additional wraparound services and support are required to help more of our first generation students travel successfully through the higher education pathway. And then we've built a pretty robust data system and a set of IT tools here, along with our workforce partners, to really manage and understand the talent pipeline so we can intervene appropriately as we see the data kind of emerging. So if you go to the next slide. We're still young. These are our cohorts that have kind of come through the Dallas County Promise. We started with the graduating class of 18, and then last year's class of 2020, and we're still kind of looking at the enrollment numbers here. But generally, we're feeling very positive as a community that our activity is improving the pipeline of our talent, particularly our talent coming from our highest poverty high schools. And we focused on our 31 highest poverty high schools first in Dallas. And as you see in cohort 1, we've had a pretty positive effect. And we know we have a long way to go, but some initial results here are pretty encouraging. And then if you go to the last slide. And so we're also not only benefiting from a great Dallas-based coalition, but we're very fortunate to be working with other regions of around the state of Texas who have a similar challenge, and that is really matching the talent pipeline to the workforce opportunities in a way that's equitable. And so we were very active this year with San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas, and Tyler, working together, learning from each other, using similar tools, and building on these partnerships. And more of these regions are kind of coming into kind of a network of post-secondary completion regions in Texas. And we feel very fortunate that this work is happening at the regional level, and we're a part of it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Ban. Love to turn over to Bryant and hear a little bit about what's going on with Upscale Houston.
Yeah, thanks, Chantel, and thanks for the team for having me. So I was going to talk a little bit today about Upscale Houston and the work that we've been doing for the past few years. So Upscale Houston, as you see, we are a part of the Greater Houston Partnership, which is the business engine of the region of Houston, which has about 7 million plus people. We're not just the city of Houston, it's Harris County and beyond. If you want to go to the next slide. So, we like to think that right now, as we're speaking, and COVID has only accelerated this, kind of the pecking order of 21st century cities is kind of being determined. And everybody needs to think about this as we do business and we try to address some of these issues. If you want to go to the next slide, Eric kind of talked about this a little bit. Sorry, keep going. Some of these issues, they're not just facing Houston, they're facing all the other cities in these regions. And these are the things that we look to address as the Greater Houston Partnership, all through the lens that we've really focused on recently through the racial equity lens, how it's impacting our community, how it's impacting education, how it's impacting all the things that make a good city as we're talking about competing on a global scale. Next slide. This is something Eric already kind of brought up a little bit. The existing workforce right now doesn't possess the education and skills necessary to fill those jobs of tomorrow. We're seeing it locally. We're needing to identify those educational outlets and those kind of certifications and skills that help really accelerate some of those issues on the last slide that we think really make a global city. And we want to make sure we're looking internally to address those issues. If you go to the next slide. So because of that, a couple of years ago, we created Upscale Houston, and it's an employer-led initiative to address workforce development in the city of Houston and beyond, where we bring employers, educational institutions, and community-based organizations to kind of work together and triangulate how we can address these issues from all aspects and really talk to each other in ways that probably haven't been happening in the past, because we do feel our educational institutions and our employers can work collaboratively, and that's really how we look to address this issue. Next slide. And so obviously what Eric mentioned was kind of making sure we're getting into those good educational opportunities. We also want to think about those, and whether you're looking from our local data or the state data or federal or across the country data, you're looking at about 40% or less of students who are right now attaining college degrees within 6 years of graduating high school. So we want to look at that 60% plus who are not. We're not trying to pull people out of college pathways. What we're doing is looking at that red line in the middle that's going straight into a career, and what we can do to really address good opportunities for good jobs for those students who might have not seen their pathway being direct into going through that four-year university system. That's really where Upscale is playing. That's our constituency. That's how we think we can work with the business community to align. Next slide. And so our three-tiered approach is through attracting those positions through marketing efforts, training, how can we work with certification and completion initiatives and CBOs to look at what training programs are out there, and then placing, making sure if we're looking at those high demand jobs, we're getting those people who are going into those programs into those opportunities. Next slide. And so kind of some of the results, these are our partnership. We have we looked at the data of who's been operating over the last 5 years. There's about 130 plus employers who are involved, 65 supporting organizations from the educational and community-based organization areas. And then we've created 4 industry sectors where you look at these issues specific to their industry and their region. And then we also have multiple websites that is meant to attract for those jobs specifically. Those are kind of where we're seeing the results. Go ahead to the next slide. And so over the next 5 years, where we kind of see this going is the demand for middle skills jobs growing, which is why we see that middle line really being where we're going to play. And then also making sure that 40% of the existing workforce that don't go beyond high school, where we can identify the skills and opportunities to point them into those jobs that are going to drive our economy going forward and make us competitive in the long run. Next slide. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Bryant. So in a lot of ways, the work that Ksenia is leading is similar, but it's also different. Would love to hear from you, Ksenia.
Thank you, Chantel. It's a pleasure to be here virtually, and I'm excited to share a bit about the Advance Together initiative, which is administered by the Dallas Fed and supported by 16 partners, including the United Ways of Texas, Educate Texas, the Kresge Foundation, the Doris Duke Foundation, and Texas Mutual, among many others. Next slide, please. This effort grew out of the Federal Reserve mission to ensure that the benefits of a strong economy are available to everyone and that all communities have access to economic opportunities. We know that in urban, suburban, and rural areas of Texas, many people face barriers that make it hard to get ahead financially. Improving their ability to complete education and find living wage jobs can help them build economic resilience and mobility. Federal Reserve and other economic research has shown that effective solutions to complex local problems in areas like education and workforce development depend on key leaders from across sectors working together towards a shared goal over a sustained period of time. In fact, the presence of deep cross-sector collaboration is a greater determinant of community economic success than any structural factor like industry mix or demographics. Through our community development function, we also learned that while there were a lot of partnerships emerging from all across the state to address gaps in education and workforce development, these collaborations often lack the resources, technical knowledge, and community connections they needed to realize their full potential. This impeded their ability to move the dial on shared goals. And the Advance Together initiative responds to these needs by providing grant funds, technical assistance, and other tools to a cohort of partnerships from across the state to strengthen their capacity to work together in new and more effective ways. Next slide, please. Our approach to amplifying the impact of participating partnership includes investing in leadership development of leaders who have mobilized around the challenge and the solution, a focus on systems change versus creating more programs, an emphasis on data-driven decision-making and adaptation, and most importantly, building the partnership's infrastructure for authentic community engagement and a focus on racial equity in service of resident-driven solutions. Next slide, please. Advance Together has two phases, design and implementation. Last October, we've invited 15 community partnerships focused on educational attainment and workforce development to submit proposals to be included in Advance Together. 9 were selected for the design phase, which is a 6-month planning process that provides a $15,000 grant and training to help each team identify gaps in their proposal, improve strategies, and refine their plan for achieving their goals. The design phase began in March and ended this August. All 9 grantees applied for the 3-year implementation phase, which is really the heart of this program. And we expect that 6 of those will be selected in December to receive a $300,000 grant to put their plan into action and advance and scale their work in communities. Next slide, please. This is a map of the 9 communities selected for the design phase through a merit-based process by an independent selection committee, which is made up of state and national level experts and funders in workforce and education fields. Some of the partnerships are focused on a city or a county, some on larger regions. They're based in Amarillo, Denton, Abilene, Midland, Temple, Austin, Jasper, San Antonio, and McAllen. And I'm gonna take a few minutes or 1 minute to tell you about a couple of them so you'll have an idea of how they're actually making a difference in their community. In Austin, the Family Pathways 2Gen Coalition helps low-income parents without a post-secondary credential improve their employment outcomes by providing a set of incentives and comprehensive supports to increase their completion of degree programs in high-demand careers. At the table, we have the United Way of Greater Austin, Austin Community College, UT Austin, Health and Human Services, the Family Leadership Council, among many others, coming together around this goal with a hypothesis that by improving the economic stability of parents, that there will be a measurable impact on the developmental outcomes for their kids. And similarly, the San Antonio partnership has taken on a dual generation approach, which is helping low-income families on the south side of San Antonio gain access to opportunities that lead to self-sufficiency and improved quality of life. They're finding really creative and innovative ways of connecting people with affordable housing, education, childcare, and good-paying jobs. And I will pause there and turn it over to Chantel for the next part of our conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks to all 3 of you for giving us insight into the collaborations that you're leading and the impact that they're making all across Texas. Appreciate you. I'd like to start, we have about 10 minutes for Q&A among the panelists, and then we'll actually turn it over for audience Q&A. So if you have a question while we're talking, please drop it into the chat and we will try and do our best to get to it through the course of the presentation. In the meantime, I'll kick it off with a few questions. So I'd like to start, you know, people who are watching this presentation are people who are part of collaborations or who've led collaborations at different stages. We all know collaboration isn't extremely easy. I'd love to hear from you what a challenge is that you've run into while setting up or executing your collaborative and where you've had to pivot.
Well, thanks, Chantel. Thinking about the Dallas County Promise, even though we have really strong leadership and very strong data systems and data sharing, it's still a great challenge in terms of the data functioning inside the K-12 system, the higher ed system, and the workforce system, not really easily talking to one another. And then the burden consistently falls on the student to re-enter their information in each phase and transition of their journey from school to work. So I think we are, in a consistent adaptive mode in terms of trying to make that work better. And it's kind of iterative. So I don't think there's a Camelot of data here that this vision is perfect. It's getting people together and really looking at the progression and looking at who's not getting through the doors and the, transitions, and trying to understand their journey better to know which levers to pull or what issues to surface to the coalition that we want to kind of work on next. So I think it's going to be a continuous challenge. It's the challenge I think we all believe is worth, fighting for on behalf of our students. And so we just, I think, continuously adapt in that scenario.
So a consistent adaptive mode and a journey and iteration. That sounds a lot like collaboration. Bryant or Ksenia, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would add my two that immediately come to mind would be data, like Eric said, and then geography. So just the pure size of, everything's bigger in Texas. We, all of the things that come along with that saying, but it also brings along a lot of the issues of a lot of people spread out across a lot of varying, diverse, different geographies and constituencies that you have to think about in a different light. So if you're not just dealing with a really homogeneous set of people, and then I also mentioned data. So the combination of data and geography and trying to look at those things together, where education data meets workforce data is, I think, where all of our it sounds like it's where we all kind of live, and trying to find out the confluence of those two things is something, along with the kind of trying to get the collective impact is really where the road meets the road.
Yeah. And we play a bit of a different role than Eric and Bryant, because we're both inside of a collaboration, and we're also supporting really messy collaborations, messy, complicated, amazing collaborations. And what we've seen our design grantees struggle with, especially in the wake of COVID, is this need to engage resident voice in the way that the partnerships are reshaping their work to respond to COVID. They're pivoting their original activities, they're pivoting their strategies, et cetera. And we and they were worried that because they're moving so fast to respond to emergencies in their backyards, that they are not creating time and space to invite residents into that process with them. And so resident engagement then becomes this kind of thing that you do when times are good and calm, but they don't have the necessary infrastructure to bake in and include those voices or bring them to the table in an emergency response mode. So that was a big challenge and a struggle for us.
Awesome. And I'd like to ask a good baseline question that's coming from the audience, which is, do you use actual collective impact theory in your work, or are you creating the steps and defining the steps in the partnership as you go?
I think I try to use any kind of framework or model as a starting point, and then work with our partners to make sure it's fit for purpose. So we always refer back to collective impact and things that are happening at the Stanford Initiative and things that we're doing locally with Rice, and and then build from there based on what we're hearing in real time from our constituents.
I think it's a combo as well. So to Bryant's point, we are a collective impact organization, but we're very programmatic too. And having, a real programming lever like a free college tuition scholarship program that we actually run, is a great entry point in having real data, real students, and supporting students in real time allows that bigger collective impact to have more context and meaning, because you're trying to solve a problem today with your partners, and an agreed upon problem. So I think it's a combination of this, kind of a collective impact theory combined with, real programmatic work with boots on the ground, supporting real people in real time.
Right, and I would agree with everything that's been said, where we're not evangelizing, the collective impact framework necessarily, but we think that cross-sector collaboration is incredibly important, and we share a lot of the DNA with the original framework. But that in and of itself is evolving, and there's like 3 versions of it at this point. So I think all we really care about is that partners are working together towards a common vision and thinking about systems rather than programs. However, the programmatic aspects are incredibly important, as that's the work that brings folks together. That's the glue, that's the exciting stuff that they like doing together. And sometimes if it's so heady and theoretical, then people don't actually understand what they're doing together.
Yeah. Years ago, I was at a conference where they described the difference between collective impact, capital C, capital I, proper noun, and collective impact, lowercase c, lowercase I, which can also be an approach that one can take. One of the things that I was really excited about to see in each of your presentations was a focus on racial equity and advancing racial equity. And there was a great Venn diagram in there that you shared, Bryant, that showed that all of your work is encompassed within this frame. Would be curious to hear from each of you, how are you adapting your approaches to ensure that they achieve better racial equity in the geographies that you serve?
I mean, I would just say we are a business-led organization. We're a traditional chamber of commerce combined with an economic development organization, combined with a public policy organization, combined with the research arm. And what we've learned is that everything that's happened in the last year has made us kind of look internally to figure out why we did things the way we've done them in the past. And it has made us reevaluate everything that we do from a business perspective, both internally and the way we deal with our constituencies. And it does make you be more proactive about each tactical move you make in terms of dealing with workforce issues or dealing with economic development issues, when you think about it through that lens, you think about it through how things have happened in the past, for sure.
For us, as I mentioned, we have kind of four big tenets or guiding principles for our approach, and we want to see racial equity show up in collaborative leadership. So that means who's around the table and what do the leaders reflect the community. In terms of systems thinking or systems change, it's identifying how systems are dysfunctional for different types of people that they serve. In terms of data and learning, it's about disaggregating data by race, ethnicity, sex, and gender, all the other social factors to understand the difference. And then community and resident engagement. Obviously, we want the solutions to be not only informed by, but eventually led by residents who are most affected by the challenges that the group comes around to address. And so a lot of the technical assistance that we provide is, and in the beginning, it's about building awareness of what racial equity is and building common definition among the partners, and then helping them work on strategies to actually advance various measures of racial equity in that community. So for us, it's really at the heart of Advance Together.
And working at the Commit Partnership, we have, kind of an internal commitment and an external commitment. So it's been a real privilege to, go through a lot of training and work at Commit, everything from courageous conversations to really looking at our salary bands and really being very transparent about who's in what slot and pay scales, and really working towards a more equitable internal approach, because we think that that internal approach will strengthen our external approach as well. And thinking about building systems and platforms, we have some really robust tools to be able to really drill down and understand the work at very granular levels. So by race, ethnicity, gender, location, high school, so we can see the progression of students always, and bringing these lenses to the work and setting equity goals, and then having tools to really track against those goals in very detailed ways is really important.
Awesome. And I'd like to ask just one more question before we get into the audience questions, which if you have a question and you're in the audience, please do drop it in the chat. We're excited to get to them. My question is around COVID. I think COVID this year has caused, all of us to reevaluate what we're doing and how we approach things. Curious what's changed in your collaborations due to COVID, and frankly, just how you're doing some of the most basic things like community engagement through these really difficult and trying times.
That's a great question. So we're a massive scholarship initiative, which really leveraged a lot of the good energy inside of high schools, which oftentimes look like pep rallies or, a lot of things you think about when you think about energizing students in high schools. Luckily, we have a really robust Salesforce implementation with a lot of texting and emailing and surveying and, robust communication tools. We're really trying to show up and listen to our students and families, and listen to our partners who are out in the schools. And it's a challenging time, and the level of attendance and engagement with students is very different. And it looks a lot different this year than it did last year. So we're trying to, again, be adaptable and try to be a good partner and support, learning from the voices and the experiences of those people we serve. In the spring, when COVID first hit, our senior class went, into full virtual mode, and the college admission process wasn't really wired to be fully virtual. And so we gathered our higher ed partners, and through a lot of courageous leadership from, UNT Dallas and Texas A&M Commerce and Texas Women's and our community college system, they agreed upon a more equitable approach to college enrollment, which means previously students are sitting at home with no one that talks college because they're majority first generation. And all of our higher ed partners had different expectations around the enrollment steps. And we asked the question, well, why can't we have one set of enrollment steps and have the students have all options? And that took a courageous decision making, but it's a much more equitable approach. And so good things often come out of challenges, and we're not going to go backwards on that one. So we're really, again, blessed to have strong leadership in the community that really focuses on more equitable processes for students.
Since I have a number of partnerships to choose from, I can share an example from the San Antonio partnership, where once COVID hit, because they were a fairly mature partnership, they really relied on the existing infrastructure of partnerships to stand up emergency services in like 48 hours time, where they pulled together a multi-million-dollar fund for childcare for essential workers, just with their table of 10 to 15 leaders, and then also funding for nonprofits to continue to be able to do the work that they need to do. And in terms of community the actual resident outreach and community engagement, because they had nonprofits and organizations with really strong relationships with residents locally, they relied on partners that could kind of get resident insight really quickly. However, because there is a really big digital divide in Texas, it has been a really big challenge to engage with residents that are not connected, and understand how they're doing, how they're faring, both economically and mentally. And that continues to be a really big challenge to this day.
Wonderful, thank you. Bryant, anything to add?
Yeah, I would say since we take more of a employer-led kind of demand-driven approach is our kind of theory of the case, is evaluate and kind of assess where those industry partnerships are and where those leadership, where the kind of feelings of our leadership team stands. If you're in an industry where unemployment is at like 25% during COVID, they're probably not going to be wondering where the people are to fill some of those roles right now. There's a kind of a reverse effect happening due to COVID. So it is a time for us to take a step back with some of those employer partnerships and wonder what the kind of more strategic relationships with our community-based organizations and educational institutions can look like. And that's where we've seen a lot of success across some of our key industries, is partnerships with community-based organizations and educational institutions where they could fill a kind of a specific need that our industry partnerships have, even in a time where unemployment rates rise.
Awesome. I think this question from the audience is probably suited to all three of you. So whoever wants to answer would be great. Do you provide transportation vouchers so people can get to training and jobs? How big of an issue is transportation, and what solutions are you finding for people to get to training and to jobs?
Yes, the community college has a DART Pass program for all students. As we know about our big geography, and Bryant has even bigger geography in Harris County, but it's not perfect. So our public transportation is by no means a solution for a great solution for all, but all of the students at the community college receive a DART Pass and have access to public transportation, and for many that is helpful, and for others there's still gaps and challenges.
Yeah, those partnerships with local municipal organizations, Houston Metro here, is similar to the DART, although we don't have quite the train infrastructure, I don't think. But also, there's organizations who are trying to do low qualification, low interest lending to certain I think it's actually an organization out of the DFW area that has a presence here that is really working to find automobile solutions for workers who qualify with kind of a less stringent qualifications to get those auto loans, and less penal also on the back end. So there are organizations out there who are working to find some of those solutions.
Wonderful. Another great question. Most collaborations are really great until it comes to funding them, and then the partners may lose interest. How do you manage cost sharing? How do you manage getting the partners to put in their money where their mouth is?
Well, we rely on the institutions to bring their scholarship dollars to the students who need them the most. And we're very fortunate, again, with strong leadership around the North Texas region and all of our colleges and universities kind of doing that. On top of that, our collaboration and our backbone organization includes resources from those institutions as well. So not only do the higher ed institutions provide the support via additional scholarships, which they obviously all can use more help with, but they assign resources to our team. So we're literally a collection of the community assets that are running the program, and so that has challenges too. But it's really a great kind of a great model or testament to the commitment of the partners.
This is a really important and challenging question, and I think that collective impact or collaborations, they're actually really expensive. They're not necessarily a cheaper way to do business, right? Because the glue that's holding collaboration together, the kind of stewarding and cat herding of all the partners, the data piece, thinking about systems, the extra time that partners put in, that's, it is very expensive. And so I think what is needed is just not even any kind of funding, not even programmatic funding. It's flexible funds to pay for that, the glue of the work. And I think finding programmatic dollars to continue the programs is actually a bit easier than finding the flexible funding that's needed to keep the full collaboration functioning at its highest potential. So, and I think that I will answer with probably another question, but I think that, or maybe with identifying the challenge for the future, which is a lot of partnerships are going to, at the end of the 3 years of the catalytic investment or whatever it is, they're probably, they're going to be able to find some of the programmatic dollars for some of the key programs that they want to run. But then the other paying for the rest would have to come from maybe the public sector thinking about doing the work differently. It would have to come from employers. I mean, there has to be some give and take and sacrifices to keep this going. But it's also a big question that a lot of collaborations haven't figured out yet.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I don't really have anything to add to it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's where the role of philanthropy is really interesting, because you sort of have, partners in a collaboration that are nonprofit partners and or business partners, which can contribute in certain ways financially. And then you also have potential philanthropic funding, which can contribute in different ways. And there's the question of local philanthropy versus national philanthropy, and how both of those can be a tool to sustain collaboration, especially the kind of glue money that you refer to, Ksenia, that's not programmatic, but to kind of hold the backbone of the infrastructure of the collaboration. So it's quite interesting. I guess we have just a couple minutes left. I'm curious, as you get into collaboration, often you find lots of different things to focus on, uncover different challenges in the journey of someone who's trying to receive services, or in the journey of someone who's whose experience you're trying to improve. How have you stayed focused on the long-term goals of your collaboration as you've moved through and kind of iterated?
I think that's been a particular challenge during everything that we're experiencing this year. So what we do try is short-term kind of solutions, short-term kind of tasks and goals, but without losing sight of what we're long-term trying to solve. So we always anchor ourselves in that and circle back to it. So just kind of reassessing periodically to make sure that if you do have those short-term kind of things that are kind of sprouting off, like you said, that kind of branch out of whatever you're doing, to make sure that if it isn't tied to your initial long-term goals, you at least find a way to anchor back to what you're initially set out to do, for sure.
Yeah, that's a challenge we're running into in collaborations we're working on at the Kresge Foundation, which is how you balance between short-term action and long-term, balancing that with the long-term plan. So that really resonates with me. Anyone else want to weigh in on that question? If not, we'll turn it over to Sean. Oh, Eric, thank you.
I just concur with what you're saying. It's a challenge. You're trying to always innovate, because the reason you're getting the result you're getting is because you're doing the same thing over, and you're trying to say, what can we do differently or better? And so you're always iterating and trying new ideas. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But keeping your focus on your goals and measuring along the way is obviously helpful. But not getting in a rut either. You got to keep swinging the bat consistently. So.
Awesome. And a quick follow-up for Ksenia. Are you finding any interest from individuals funding Advance Together, or is it primarily funded by foundations?
Yeah, so Advance Together is funded by national foundations, local foundations, and I guess the philanthropic arms of corporate like Texas Mutual. So I think the goal is to get more private sector participation, and I think that the vision for the model is actually to have, eventually even some investment from the public sector as well. So it could be public, private, nonprofit, and that we're modeling this type of pooling together of resources for the teams that we're supporting, and that's the goal. But getting support from private sector and public sector is a lot harder than the philanthropic sector. So that's I think that will be true in a lot of places across the country.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to thank all three of you for your contributions to this discussion and conversation. It's clear that the work you're doing is exceptional and it's going to make a big difference for people all over the state. It's been a pleasure to moderate this panel and to speak with each of you today. I'm Chantel Resch. I'm the Managing Director of American Cities at the Kresge Foundation. We're a private foundation based in Metro Detroit. We've been happy to support Advance Together, so thanks for inviting us to be a part of this conversation today. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Sean to close us out.
Chantel, thank you. Dr. Ban, you said it so well at the start of this session. Moving the needle on any significant issue requires a coalition. And that really was an exceptional look at some of the pioneering collaboratives that are moving our state and our region forward. I thought it was fascinating to hear not only how you're collaborating among the organizations of the collaborative themselves, but also how you're being intentional in collaborating with the communities and constituents you serve, and really ensuring their voices have power. And so, Chantel, thank you so much for moderating this conversation. Eric with Dallas County Promise, Bryant and Upscale Houston, Ksenia and Advance Together. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share this with us and share this with everyone at home and maybe watching from the office as well. So we certainly need more effective and more intentional collaboratives if we're really to advance economic equity. And we know these conversations are valuable in moving the needle there. These conversations absolutely wouldn't happen without our bigBANG co-producers like the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. And we're really proud to say that bigBANG is a very collaborative event in how it comes together, and to see our partners push these conversations forward. So as well, thanks to Tom and Celanese for the introduction. We're very proud to say that we've worked with Celanese and the North Texas community, and we look forward to continuing that. To everyone at home, this wraps up our bigBANG programming for the day, but we're excited to see you back here tomorrow. In the meantime, we encourage you to take a look at the schedule that you can find on the app, plan which other sessions you might want to join us for, might be able to join us for. You may want to spend some time in the sponsors and marketplace tab. There are a number of exceptional partners out there, and some social enterprises in the marketplace that absolutely deserve your attention and are worth knowing about. As well, this evening, we're very excited to attend the pitch from the United Way Metropolitan Dallas. And so for our upstanders, you should already have your ticket for that. And for everyone else, please visit unitedwaydallas.org, and you can certainly find more info on the pitch there. We hope you'll join us. We hope you'll support your favorite social enterprise, and maybe help them get some funding to carry the mission forward. So today's sessions were largely focused on economic equity. That's a theme we'll certainly take back up Thursday and certainly again on Friday. There are a number of really exciting sessions at the end of the week. So look forward to seeing you all again. And again, thank you to our panelists and the Federal Reserve.